Alright, so next we're going to start by covering the abdominal muscles. First I'm going to draw in the red, and then I'll draw in the cartilage that separates the muscles in between. I'll make this a mid-muscle as well. I'm going to kind of draw a center line here. So basically the abdominal muscle is going to connect to around the fifth, sixth, and seventh coastal cartilage part of the rib cage. The pec muscle will come out and it will cover part of the upper abdominal muscle. It's also good to know where your belly button is. So your belly button lies at about right here on the second portion so right here at the second cartilage portion of the vertebrae, which is also, make sure that works out right, yeah, which is also right about the top of the hip bones. So you can see the top of the hip bones come up to about where you have your love handles coming in, and then that's about where your belly button will lie. Actually, I had my instincts right the first time. That's why I knew it didn't look right. It comes down to more right about here. So right just a little bit below the top part of the love handles. So I knew that was right. I don't know why it was confusing me there. The abdominal muscles are going to be about this thick here, and they're going to come down, and they're going to get thinner as they come down here. This is the overall shape of the abdominal muscles. We'll break them up with the cartilage that goes between them. But for now, let's just memorize this general shape. And it's this kind of map you can memorize too. This shape map here is a good thing to this shape right here that we're learning. This is a good shape to memorize. The muscles will begin to connect right around here. There's a tendon there that they're connecting to. And then the first break will be here where the belly button is. They're going to kind of have a shape like this. At least I like to draw them like this. They think they look cool. Then I'll draw some. Actually, I got to fill that in with red now, don't I? Like this. Right, and we're also going to have this midsection here being separated with a tendon type material. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in there now. We'll separate this with some light lines and some dark lines. Okay, so that's the shape of that first muscle there. Well, actually, I think I'm going to go ahead and draw this in a little bit thicker, like so. I'm going to kind of etch in now the shape of the muscles and where they belong. So the first muscle, we know the bottom of it here, that first section that separates, that is the cartilage between the muscles that separates, occurs right here at about the belly button. An easy way to memorize this is the next one occurs at about the bottom of the sternum here. And so if you have the pec muscles there, you know it's to be, just a little bit below the pec muscles. So it's like that, then okay, this comes a little bit below the pec muscles. Some people's pec muscles come down further and the ab up higher, and so you can't always see that upper ab muscle here. I like to draw it with a kind of a shape like this, kind of like an angled shape. Looks a little bit cooler. And the next one just kind of lies in the center there, and give that just a slight upward angle as well, like so. Let's go ahead and color these in. And then I'm going to kind of pull the cartilage coming into it by pulling the muscle up into it as well. Okay, so I'm going to kind of make this break there. Make that break there. Kind of color in this basic shape. So this line down the center is called a linea alba, which I believe just means white line. It's the white line. See, it's like, it sounds all sophisticated when you hear it in Latin and you're thinking, oh, that's a really cool muscle name, and then you learn the meaning of it. It's like, oh, that's pretty simplistic. White line. It's like, that's it. That's how they name stuff. But it's much easier for us to learn it in English, wouldn't it? Just like translate it. Don't let us. Why learn the freaking Latin pronunciation? Why learn Latin words, period, for medical reasons? Why can't we just call it English stuff that, in other words, translate into English and then learn that? That just seems much easier. Right, so this is the basic shape of the abdominal muscles. And if you know the kind of general connective points, it connects down here to the bottom of the pelvis. And then it connects up here to starting at the 5th rib down, and it's being covered by the pectoral muscles. If you kind of memorize that connection point, and then you know the bottom, there's this one here, the line by the belly button. You know where the belly button's at, just a little bit below the top of the hip crest, or the top of the, or rather the very, very top of the love handles, a little bit below that. It's obviously below the lowest part of the rib cage as well, the belly button. And then this one is about where the lowest part of the rib cage is, and this one here is about where the bottom of the sternum is. And if you memorize the location of the separation of these muscles, then you know how to draw, you pretty much know how to draw these muscles. They're very flat muscles, so from the side, they're not going to look like bulbs like this. They're more like this, right? So they're more like this. So they're pretty flat muscles, and that, if you've watched my course on form, you know how to shade something that has form that's more flat than more bulbous. If you don't worry. We'll be going through a form of the muscles as well, as that's important to know how to shade a human being properly to make them look realistic from your imagination. This is all to gear you to train your mind to have all this information in it and your neural network that you can easily and readily access to draw the human figure from your mind. And that's what all these exercises are designed to do. So if you go through the exercises, you'll be able to draw the human figure from your mind like you never have before. You'll be able to logically figure things out and go, okay, I know where this muscle connects. I know the general skeletal structure memorized. I know that this muscle connects to this part of the skeletal structure and this part, and that means that the muscle should look like this if the arm was stretched like so. It's such and such, and you'll be able to figure all that kind of stuff out. Right, so that's the abdominal muscles. Go ahead and make sure you memorize this. This shape is really important to memorize, so go ahead and memorize it. I'm also going to draw some lines continuing through, some light lines. These are the breakup muscle lines that continue through this region of the body. So this is the external obliques, and it kind of continues through into here. That is, into that fascia material. You can kind of see the fibers, and so they still kind of make a shape like that, and it's an important shape to memorize. Right, so please go ahead and memorize the place on the belly button. Draw this a few times from reference. Draw a few times from memory until you feel like you have this down. This is an important part of the body to memorize. You definitely want to take the time to make sure you got this down good. Understanding this kind of shape structure too is good, because then later on we're drawing ab muscles, you'll kind of give them, some style. And when you give them this little bit more style here, you'll see, aha, that looks cooler than, how you might normally draw abs. So it'll help you add style to your abs as well. Let's try to pronounce that word again, the full actual medical name, rectus abdominis. So I'm going to call them again the abs. If you're curious what the abs do, they do quite a few different things. One, they protect your, I believe it's the small intestine, because it's vulnerable to being moved around or moved in any way, and so they protect that. They also protect a lot of your inner organs. They also help to hold your organs into place, and they help you bend your back over when you flex your tummy, and they help in a lot of movement within your torso area. Right, so next let's draw the abs from the 3/4 view. Again, we know that just like over here, this will start to connect and have that center line first that comes down here, so let's kind of draw that center line in, just kind of sketch it in. Have that first muscle come up here. And then know at the kind of bottom, this, let's see if we can get rid of this. So it's below the bottom, this is where it starts to connect. And a little bit below that, I'm trying to think of a good way to memorize where that part is. I guess just memorize it as a little bit below that region. That's just the easiest way to memorize it, I think. A little bit above the elbows is where you're going to have this, or the bottom of the rib cage, however you want to look at it. Remember, you have your belly button coming in about here, a little bit below this part of the love handle, the top part of the love handle. So it's kind of even with the top part of the hip crest there. And then finally these muscles which come all the way down like so. Right, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to color in the basic shape of the muscles here, like so. After I had the basic shapes colored in, I'll come back and add the linea alba. You could also just, again, draw the entire red shape and then break it up with the lines if you wanted to do it that way. You might find that easier. I'm going to make that more in the middle. There we go. Right, now this part here, I'm going to pause and do it because all I'm going to be doing is adding in the details of the muscles. Go ahead and practice this now from the 3/4 view a few times till you feel like you have it down. You'll note that the muscles really don't start to foreshorten much on this side here until the body really turns away from us more. Then it cuts off part of it, then it looks like the foreshortened, but really they're being cut off. It's like a cylinder, right? You have a cylinder shape, and then you have, let's say, this pattern drawn on it. As it turns away from our eye view, you get to see, sorry about that, as it turns away from eye view, we only get to see part of this rectangle, so we're only seeing this portion here. Again, if this is really, if that kind of concept I just taught you is confusing and foreshortening stuff is confusing, you definitely want to get my course on form, lighting, and perspective. Right, and then finally we'll go ahead and get the same concept to the side view of the muscles. Remember, you have the belly button a little bit below here, so it's going to fit right about there. Alright, sorry about that. There's some weird, the Wii in the background started making some really weird noise. Remember, these muscles are really flat, so they don't stick out much at all. They're more of a flat muscle. You have the next muscle kind of angles up. And remember, that's a little bit higher than the rib cage. That's that separation there. The next separation happens right about here. And again, if you want to get technical, like how can you memorize what's the technicalness of that muscle, how do you know that it connects there, is to think about it as being a little bit below the pectoral muscles. That's how you get that cut right there. It comes down like this. I'm going to go ahead and make this cut like that. Okay, now we just got to go ahead and add in the details. I'll pause for that. Alright, so do take the time to memorize the side view as well. Draw it for reference a few times, draw it from memory a few times, go back and forth till you have a good handle on it. This muscle is a very important muscle group, so you definitely don't want to skimp past it. You do want to memorize the abdominal muscles. Right, now we'll get into back muscles. There's a couple under back muscles. Like I said, there's a bunch of muscles that connect all in the spine area and underneath and so forth. Those muscles aren't important to anatomy to learn. And these next ones aren't all that important either, but I'm going to just go through them very quickly, the basic shape of them. They're under muscles. So first you have your levator-scapulae, which basically raises up your scapula. It kind of goes here. It connects up to this top vertebrae, these top two vertebrae, I believe. And so it has a shape like this. And then it branches out to a couple little branches up there like that. Right, that's the basic shape. I'm not going to draw any detail on it. It's not important to memorize. You don't have to memorize any of this. I'm just doing it for sake of completion. You have another one, which is the rhomboid minor and the rhomboid major. And the basic shape that they're going to connect to the scapula as well. And they just kind of come up like in this region here. I forget the exact what. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I think it connects to this one here actually. It's either this one or that one, but it really doesn't matter because it's not that important. It's the basic shape of this muscle. So one is small and the one's big. And we can actually just draw all as one big shape if you wanted to. And the main thing is this has a shape like that where it comes up, connects to the edge. So that's the major shape of it. I'll just draw that one division line only, just to show the difference between the major and minor. And that's it. So pretty basic stuff there. Again, this isn't something you have to memorize. It's not important. But I'm only doing this for the sake of completion. Because I did some other minor muscles, but that are actually more important. Like the teres major is a more important minor muscle because it is seen from certain views when the arm's lifted up. Right, so that's that. Okay. There's also some down here we'll cover really quickly. And this is the serratus posterior inferior. So this is kind of like connected to the serratus that we drew up here. It's pretty simple. Basically, it kind of connects like something about like so. So a little bit below the scapula. I forget the exact spine part it connects to. Again, it's not that important. If you want to look it up, you can in a medical book, but it has a basic. Dang it, that's not the color I wanted. Come on, pick the right color. It has a basic shape like this. Comes down about there, and it goes underneath this muscle here. Then it kind of comes over this one and connects like that to the ribs. Again, this muscle isn't an important muscle to memorize. It's going to be covered by all of the major muscles. But I'm just going to cover, like I said, just for the sake of completion, I'm going to put it in here. Oops. Kind of want to draw the basic shape of this muscle. Like that. Okay, so just draw, hopefully you're just drawing along with me, but you're not going to like spend the time to memorize it unless you really want to, you think it's important, but it really isn't. Right, so that's that. And you can kind of break that into 4 segments if you wanted to. Okay, and voila. Right, so now we'll get into the actual muscles that are important, that matter to anatomy of the back. All right, next we'll draw the teres major and the teres minor muscle. So the teres minor, let's see if I can go and vanish these muscles here first. So it's going to be connecting, it connects from here in the scapula, and it's going to go over to connect right here in the humerus, just below these other muscles that you see here. So just, it's going to be connecting right here just below that. So you'll be able to see, you won't be able to see the part that's connected to the scapula because it's underneath this muscle, but it comes up like this. And then the teres major will connect down here on the scapula, connect down here on the scapula, and it'll come to this part of the humerus. So one's on the outside, one's more on the inside. Boom, like that. And it's the teres muscle that sometimes you can see when the arm's lifted up, and we'll get into that when we draw different positions of the body to learn more of the dynamics of muscles, like how muscles look in movement or in different poses. Remember these muscles here that we went over, which you kind of kind of deal with as three muscles. And when you have this one, the lat muscle that will come around like this, connects to the humerus and comes around this way. These muscles are kind of the deltoid, and the lat kind of reveals some of these muscles, and then this back muscle here, which will be your trapezius, it kind of reveals some of these muscles in between that, and you'll see when we draw the human back and the skin on it, how those muscles will play a role, and those muscles were called the infraspinatus. So just for a quick recap, right? So these are like already low muscles, and the other muscles actually go underneath them. And so what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to make a temporary layer underneath here, and then I'll merge the layers together because it's not important to be able to see where they connect. That's why I'm showing you where they connect now. So they connect underneath here, like I said, under the infraspinatus muscle, and it's going to come up and it's going to connect right about here. So that's where its connection point is going to be, and it's going to kind of go like that. So you're not going to see a whole lot of it, but you do see some of it. Right, and also, I'm going to have to do, what layer is that muscle on? That one's way up, that was on that layer too. I have to go above it. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to just draw to the edge, because it goes in front of that muscle there, the chora brachialis, so I need to draw it like this. Right, the next one connects right below it, and it kind of goes like this, and it connects down here, and it kind of goes more like that. So you can actually see more of this muscle here. And I need to bring it all the way up here, I guess, because it goes over that muscle as well. Alright, we'll take this color here, and this will be the tendon where it attaches to the bone, and the tendon where that teres major and teres minor. The teres major is on the bottom, teres minor is on the top. Let's draw some dark lines to separate these muscles. This muscle actually, the teres major actually goes over the teres minor. It overlaps it just a little bit. Okay, so that's those two muscles there. Take your time in learning the placement of those muscles, because again, they are kind of important when you raise your arm. Right, so let's go ahead and draw it on the other side over here. This is one of those muscles you really do want to draw from both sides, because you want to have it memorize how the muscle works. So we know it goes under here and attaches. We'll be able to see a little bit of the muscle like this. That's the teres minor. The teres major connects here right underneath it, and it kind of overlaps that muscle a little bit, and you'll be able to see more of it, like so. Add a few lines in there. Now we'll go ahead and connect the tendon, and connect this tendon as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and separate these muscles here with the black line. I want to kind of separate those muscles as well, just so the separation is clear, like that. Right, so from the 3/4 back view, you won't be able to see these muscles, these two at all, but you will be able to see the ones on his right side. Again, just know the insertion point. If you know the insertion points connects right about there, then you know where to draw the muscle from pretty much any angle, because you're like, okay, I know the insertion point's here, I know it kind of overlaps that muscle, I know it kind of connects underneath that muscle over there. So once you know that, then you know the shape of the muscle from pretty much any angle. So really you want to memorize the insertion points. That's the important part to memorize. Remember, this muscle overlaps that muscle, so that gives you an idea of how the lines will look. We'll add a few lines here, a few little white highlights. Again, maybe separate these with the black line. And then we'll use our tendon color. If you watch a human dissection for anatomy, you'll notice that the tendons obviously aren't quite this color. They're a little different, lighter color, but I want to make it clear you can see them and tell them from the color from the bone. Right. So from the side view, you can also see the oh my gosh, that muscle is so irritating to say. The infraspinatus. That's kind of a tongue twister for me. We can also see the teres major and minor. So what I should do really fast is let's just draw a big mass of these muscles. I didn't draw these muscles last time from the side view, but you actually can see them. So this is the infraspinatus. We can see a little bit like that. Then it's all I kind of link them all together as kind of like not one muscle, but they all kind of like I treat them kind of all as like one muscle here. This muscle comes out underneath that one. That's the teres minor. Then remember the teres major connects on the underside of the bone, so we won't see its connection point, but we know it connects under there. What we will be able to see is this part of the muscle that comes around like that. Now I know it's hard to see, so I'm going to go ahead and separate it. So first you have the infraspinatus, and we'll just kind of show some of the separation of that muscle. Then you have the teres minor, and the teres major, which is going to be coming like so. So notice it comes underneath the arm, but we can't see its insertion point. We'll see a little bit of the tendons on this one as well. Just a little bit of tendon color on that side, which I didn't do over here, like that. Right, so we don't see the teres major or minor from other positions unless the arm is raised up. So we'll get into that later when we deal with dynamic poses and then how the muscles look in those different poses. Because it's important how muscles change when the body moves. And once you have the muscles figured out and you know their insertion points, it's pretty easy to figure out logically what the muscle will look like when it's in different positions. But still, we're going to go through that anyway just to make sure that you're on the right track and that you learn a few times, a few positions, and then your brain just kind of gets it, and it's like, oh, okay, then you're able to switch the body around and place the muscles attachments, and that's the most important part. Once you know the attachments, you just draw the shape of the muscle between those attachments, and bam, you got your muscle where you need it to be. Right, so I think now we'll move on to some back muscles now. So like I said, if this skeleton was complete with all the different back muscles, the little ones and stuff like that aren't important to drawing anatomy, you'd have all these muscles, little ones in here, then you'd have like a little bit bigger ones in here, and all this would have redness behind it, and only a very little bit of rib would be showing, and maybe a little bit of the center of the spine, just so you know that that's what it would look like. But the major muscles that are important to our anatomy is what we're going to go into next, or important to at least drawing the human figure. Right, so the first one we'll do is the latissimus dorsi. It's a big muscle, also known as the lats or as the wings when you flex them from the front, like Bruce Lee, when he has that cobra kind of look. That's when they stick out kind of far. So the insertion points are going to be along the spine, and it's going to be pretty much even with the bottom of the scapula. So they'll start connecting the insertion point to the spine here, all the way down toward the bottom of the spine. And it'll connect all the way down here to like the bottom of the sacrum. It works its way up and over, like has a shape, kind of follows the hip, it comes up and around the hip, and then stops right about here, and this is where it comes up and it connects to the actual humerus bone. It connects up in between, so it goes behind the tricep from the back view, and it connects to like the inside back of the bicep of that humerus bone. So just a little bit about the latissimus dorsi, and also the teres major and minor, I forgot to tell you, helps assisting in the backward rotation of the arm and moving the arm backward. And the latissimus dorsi has several functions. So it helps the same thing, helps the rotation of the arm backward. It also helps move the arm in an outward position. It also helps your body when climbing, like rock climbing or climbing a ladder and so forth. It also helps when breathing in when you take out you're finishing your last expiration, when you're breathing out that last bit of air. Believe it or not, it's also active if you're playing a flute or something, or some sort of wind instrument. Right, so also it's going to, when it comes off of the humerus, it's going to cover the very tip of the scapula bone. So to know the insertion point, it inserts actually right here, almost, it kind of connects with the fibers of the teres major here. So it kind of connects right here. So it has almost the same insertion point, and it's going to run like this just over your tip of the scapula, come down here, have the shape up here like that, and come up. Alright, and it does overlap the teres major. And I'm almost thinking from this back view, the teres major should be, well, it depends on the person, but it should be a little bit thicker, coming more down to the bottom of the scapula there. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that a little bit thicker, like so. Take the black line, reinforce it again, like this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and merge that layer down now because it's no longer necessary to have him merge it down with the mid muscles here, like so. Alright, so the outer muscles, like I said, it does go under the tricep, so I will make a temporary layer for it and show its connection point, which is right about here. Then we know the other connection points are going to be all along here, like so. Kind of has a shape like this. Comes up here, folds around the iliac crest of the hip, comes out a little ways like this. Kind of has a thin membrane like that and comes around like so. Right, that's the major shape of it. And actually I'm going to make it a little bit thinner, like that. Okay. I'm going to use my trick here to color that in. Right, so that's the major shape of this muscle. There's two important factors that you'll memorize. We'll also memorize a certain back diagram that will help see this, and when you see the skin added in your shading bodies, you're going to see how helpful it is. The first thing though is where you have the beginning of this muscle. So first let's draw the tendon flesh color here, and it's going to be kind of like this. So I'm going to just draw all this in here. Also there's a tendon here, that where it connects to the arm. Just going to kind of pull it out like so. It's important, now this tendon here is still going to have some texture to it, some muscle texture, but it's important to know this shape right here. It's important to memorize this line right here. This is going to be a shading line. Another shading line is going to be right about here, where you can kind of see like the ribs falling out, and that's another important part. It follows the line of the scapula. If you imagine a line that goes like this from the scapula, these two lines are going to be important to memorize, and we'll memorize them in our back diagram. So the whole lines are going to kind of go like this. That's the shape of the texture of the muscle, of its fibers. I'm just going to draw a few white lines like that for the tendon part. Okay. Just going to draw a few fibers here to kind of show the shape. Now here, this is where this part's important. Right here where the muscle begins to attach, this is something important to memorize about the fibers. And again, you'll memorize it with the back diagram that we'll get into later, when we help to simplify the body and to memorize all this complexity. But still, it's really good to memorize the complexity if you can, the best you can. Knowing the insertion points and muscles will really help when you're drawing the figure from different views. I can't stress that enough. If you really want to be good at drawing figures from your imagination, and you want to be able to work as a comic artist or pretty much any type of art, you're going to have to be able to draw the figure quickly, but especially comic art and storyboarding and stuff for movies. So these two shadow lines here are important to memorize, these dark fiber lines, because you're going to see those constantly when you're drawing the figure from different points of view and different poses. Just adding a few highlights to the muscle there. Right, so that's the major shape of the muscle that you want to memorize, and the direction of the fibers, which is important to memorize. Right, so go ahead and draw that a few times from the reference, and then draw it a few times from memory, until you have a pretty good grasp on this here. You want to have a good grasp on this before you continue on. And this is one of those muscles, again, you're going to want to memorize from both sides. So we're going to treat the next one as an entirely different lesson. And I want you to cover this up so you can't see it. If we're working on paper, cover it with a piece of paper. We're going to Photoshop, make another layer, color that in with the color so you can't see it. Right, so when we draw, it follows the same. We're going to draw the muscle from the other side. Follows that same shape. Connects to the bone right about there. You want to kind of have a curve in and then kind of curving out a little bit, because this is what's known as the wing muscle. Covers the very tip of the scapula there. I might as well go ahead and color this in with the tendon with the color, and here like so with the color. I'm going to go ahead and pause while I fill this in. All right, remember the other line, so that line's already there, it was already outlined for us. The other line, I'm going to pull a few of these tendon colors actually through here. And the other line, remember, follows the scapula. So if you just kind of imagine the scapula continuing to go down like that, then you know you have your other line right in here. This is the other shadow line you want to memorize. And you want to memorize this line, so don't just memorize the shape of this muscle, memorize this line as well. Right, so draw it a few times from reference, a few times from memory, until you have a good feel for this muscle here. It's an important muscle to memorize, and it'll make a big difference in your figures to know how this muscle works. Like so. Like so. Right, next we'll draw it from different angles, but again, draw the left side too a few times from reference and a few times from memory. I just want to make sure you have a really good grasp of this muscle and how it works. And I probably should go ahead and pull this down a little bit here, just so it's more even. And I'm going to use a 3 brush here to kind of put the shadow area in there. So it won't look exactly the same now, but that's alright, it'll look good. Okay. Alright, going to show the overall shape of this muscle a little bit here. Oops. Okay. Right, next we'll draw I'm going to just call it the lats from now on instead of the latissimus dorsi, because that's just like a lot to say. And most people call it the lats anyway. We'll draw the lats from the 3/4 view now. Right, so when we draw this, the lats from the 3/4 back view, right, so again, once you know the insertion points, you know it's kind of on the inside of the under part of this humerus bone, and it's a little bit below the teres major, it's like right there next to it, and to come across, it's going to go over the tip of the scapula there, the bottom of the scapula. You know, it goes down the center of the spine here. It follows down here, down the sacrum, comes up around the hip bone, the iliac crest, comes up, kind of has a it depends on the person. Like this wing can be really wide, or it can just be kind of like this. It just depends on the person how much they have built that muscle up. Actually, I'm gonna kind of starts going more like that. So there we go. It goes behind underneath that arm there. So you can see once you memorize the insertion points, it's really just like connecting the dots, sort of. It's kind of like a paint by numbers system. Once you got it memorized, you just plug in the dots. Okay, I know it goes here, here, here. This is the, then you know the main shape of how it connects those dots, and then you just imagine the body from any position, put the muscle in its proper connecting points, and then draw the in-between lines, and you could figure out how the muscle will look from that position. We'll most likely be able to figure that out. So now I'm going to go ahead and do just a couple white lines here to kind of start to get the shape of the fibers. We know we have a bunch of muscle fibers here, like so. Take this gray color, just kind of push up some of these fibers into the muscle to show like it's connected to it. And that part's not something you have to memorize. Okay, so remember this part here, this is something you want to memorize though. This darker part here, where the muscle connects, the shadow, which you should already have memorized, that's that first shadow you see. And you're going to see when we draw this muscle with skin on it, you're going to see just how important and why it's so important to have this shape memorized. Or why it's important to have, remember that scapula goes, why it's important to have these two shadow points memorized. Because you're going to see it on bodybuilders and people that have that muscle developed. You're going to see that division there is visible. And it's that division, these two shaded divisions here, that will give you that nice look on buff people in the back. Right, so that's the 3/4 view, the back turn 3/4 view. You see it doesn't really change much, but the other one you see a lot less of the muscle. Right, because we know the connecting points, we know that it's in a it's going to wrap around, it's going to go over this bottom point of the scapula, and we know it's going to wrap around and connect to the inside of the humerus bone up in here, and so we know we're going to see most of that is going to be out of our view, and it's going to come down like this. This is where you decide how big the person's wing muscles are. That is how big their lats are. I'm going to go out like this. Keep it, I'm not going to make them too buff. We'll go through how to draw like buff superheroes and stuff too. And then it's going to kind of come like this. You're going to be able to see a little bit of the love handle. You can see it actually kind of comes, most of this is going to be right here. Actually, this muscle is going to come down like this. And it's going to come down this area here. Like that. Okay, and it comes like this. That's the shape. So you can figure out the shape just by thinking about, logically figuring out where the connecting points are and then kind of connecting them and knowing what's rolling around. If you don't know anything about form and foreshortening and things turning away from your view and all that, then you definitely want to watch my, because this will help it'll help you draw the figure much better, as the form, dynamic lighting, and perspective. That course will help you understand how to draw 3D objects from your imagination, how to shade them and everything. So it'll just make it that much easier to rotate things like this in your mind. You're not going to see most of this is going to be like that. Right. We're not going to see any of the ligaments on the other side over here because they're turning out of our view. But we'll go ahead and add the little marks here. All this is going to kind of come around like this. Just kind of put a few Because someone that's really buff, you can actually see some of these tendons there, not tendons, but you can see, well, let's say it's tendon lines, you know, the tendon structure or texture. You can kind of see some of that, and that's why I'm having you memorize that there are texture lines there, not just on the red part. If you look at a extreme bodybuilder, you'll see what I mean. Right, so we have this first part here that's all shadow and darker. That goes all along there. I'm just doing this very quickly, so I'm not trying to do like a totally render drawing. This one is almost going out of view. It follows the scapula line, and so you can tell what the scapula is supposed to be. And by knowing where the scapula and stuff is supposed to be from different angles, if you just have a very primitive idea of the skeletal structure memorized, then you'll be able to add all that to your figures when you're drawing them. And it's really easy. We'll go through it. We'll go through that, the basic design of the skeleton, like it's kind of like a stick figure skeleton, but it has enough information for you to be able to draw and turn the figure around in 3D space. All right, so there's that. Go ahead and get familiar with how this looks from this angle. So draw this a few times from reference and draw a few times from memory, and maybe even make up a few more angles really quick if you want, just see how well you do in attaching it, and then we'll get into other positions later on in the course. And we'll get into, and when we do the side view and stuff, we'll get into how this muscle looks when you have your arm raised and stuff, but we're going to make sure all the other muscles are there first before we start doing that. We're going to have all the muscles done and memorized, their connection points and all that. Once we have all the muscles memorized and the basic connecting points, then we'll get into, you know, drawing with the arm raised and things like that. And the reason why is because, you know, when you draw the body in dynamic poses with the arm, with like an arm raised up or something, you want to make sure you have all the muscles there so it looks proper, you know, so when you're drawing the figure and everything. And we're not even going to get into that until after also we add the skin layer over the muscles. So, but still, we'll kind of go through a muscle drawing first, and then we'll kind of add the skin over it when we're doing the different figures. We'll start with the basic skeletal structure and all that. So don't worry, that's all coming up. We will definitely be going through all the dynamic poses and everything. I don't want you to think that it's just going to be these boring poses. All right. Right, now there's something you can memorize from the side view that I think that'll help you when drawing the lat muscle. Is knowing we have the socket here, right? That's where the muscle is connected. That's where the arm goes into. This is part of your scapula and everything. Right, so you can imagine a circle there. So when we get into a more simplified version, you know, it's kind of like, you know, your rib cage will be kind of drawn, you know, like this, but it'll be like leaning forward a little bit more than that. So when you draw your rib cage, it'll be kind of like this, and so you kind of get into a basic mannequin drawing like that, and you know your arm connects in this area. So we haven't got there yet, but if you've already gone through like my Mastering My Figure course, you kind of have a similar idea to that. But we'll be doing something much better than the Mastering My Figure course. In fact, that course won't be needed anymore. This will be a full, complete course, I decided. Right, so you imagine that shape there, and then right connecting below that shape, below that scapula kind of circle there, where the humerus bone is going into, fitting into, you come off right here, and you have a shape that kind of comes down like this. I'm going to make sure it's behind that muscle there, the chora brachialis, because we're drawing behind all that. And it comes right about here, and then it kind of has a shape coming down like this, and remember it connects to this part of the, as you can see from the back, it's connecting quite far before, you know, kind of like to the iliac crest of the hip. And so from the side view, it actually kind of connects, not, well, I guess it's more back here. It's kind of more like this. So let's go ahead and erase some of that. And it kind of comes like that. So it kind of has this kind of curve to it like that. Then it comes, falls around. Remember, it comes all the way down, goes around the iliac crest, comes down here to the sacrum, but not to the coccyx, whatever. And kind of comes up like this. And this helps define and give the back a lot of its shape. From here, it kind of, you know, because it connects to the inside of that humerus bone, and it comes, and it wraps around it. It's going to have this kind of curve like this to it. Right, so it's not going to totally cover the teres major, but it covers part of it. Goes back around, remember, and then from the side view, you're just going to see part of it here. It's going to have kind of a thickness to it because it's covering the entire spine, like so. And I might, I don't think it's necessary really with this muscle to like remove the arm or do another view without the arm. But don't worry, we'll be drawing the figure with the arm raised and things like that, so it'll make more sense. you'll get a more bigger picture of how these muscles look from different angles. But for now, this is good. We're learning how they change the shape of the body, and we're learning their connecting points. And the main thing is you want to learn is how they change the shape of the body, and then the connecting points is the thing you want to memorize the most. As you can see, once you have the connecting points, everything else kind of flows from there. And remember, the lines all kind of curve from the up, and they come out and down, and they all kind of come like that around to the back point over here. From the side view, remember you have the scapula come around, you can kind of see a little bit of this shadow point as it connects back around to the side of this muscle here. And you're going to kind of see some of that like that. And that's important because I lost my train of thought, sorry. Because from that side view you can actually see that like kind of like a part of the rib and stuff there. Important part to memorize. Knowing how it looks from the side view is important. You don't want your side views looking funny. Everything else looks solid, and then you try to draw. And also, whenever you draw any 3/4 view, your side knowledge is important. Because if you don't know how to draw the figure from the side, when you try to go and draw it from the 3/4 view, it's not going to look right. Because 3/4 view is mostly side. Well, I mean not mostly, but it's a lot side and a lot front, or a lot back. Depends what 3/4 view. So the side view is important. Basically, is what I'm saying is don't neglect it. Don't neglect to learn the side view. I'm just kind of define the shape of this muscle here. A little bit darker tone. Right, so that's how the lats look from the side. And from the 3/4 in the front view, you don't see much of the lats, but you do see a little bit of them. Remember, what's important is that we know the connecting point. So we know it connects, you have that little circle area in here. We know it connects to the inside of the humerus there, and it kind of comes down, which we learned from the side view, like this. And then that's when it comes down, and you can see that part down there where it's connecting. And then you don't really see much of it, like, because it's going behind the body. So that's the part you're going to see, like so. I'll add white highlights first. They're all kind of coming around, going around like that. You're going to see a little bit of this, again, where the scapula comes around, that darker shaded part. Go add that in there. I'm not going to see any of the other part. I do want to show the definite shape of this muscle right here, like so. Right, so that's where you can kind of see how your wings kind of go into this muscle here, your serratus, where your serratus connects to, and if you add the pec muscles here, you can see how this all goes together. So you can see some of the serratus, and then how you have your obliques kind of coming together in this cross stitch here that we learned. And so your wing muscles kind of are part of that. So when you flex, you'll kind of see the wing muscles kind of having the scoop, and we'll get into how that muscle looks when it's flexed and everything. Right, so that's all you can see from that view. And then from the front view, you're only going to see if the person's very big or if they're flexing. Even if they're really big, you're pretty much only going to see this muscle if they're flexing. And this is really typical of comic book characters to have this. So let's go ahead and add that in there. Again, we know the connecting points here. And then it kind of comes out, and this is if the person's really buff, it's going to kind of come out like this. And when they're flexing, it kind of comes in this area right here. And this is all behind this, so it's not totally covering any of that. And this is usually only going to show up if they're actually flexing. But typically comic book characters, I don't know, it seems like they're always flexing. They're in that perpetual state of flexing and popping their rib cage out like they're holding in a breath or something. No matter, even if they're just standing there. Let's add a little bit of shape like that to the bottom of the muscle just to kind of show its form a little bit. Right, so it kind of looks like that from the front view. So this is what gives you that, kind of have a really cobra looking back. And then you have your love handles here. And it comes down like that. Then your legs come way up here, and we'll get into the legs. But what's important about the legs, I'm going to just mention this briefly before we get into them later, is the legs, they actually come way up here, as you can see. They come up and they meet, they partly start and they meet your love handle, and then they come way down here and they start here as well. So you have this this shape here is a really important shape to memorize. And learning the anatomy this way will help you learn the legs like you've never learned them before, and all the muscles really. All right, so the next and most important and large back muscle to learn is the trapezius, and this is typically what's referred to as like your neck muscles when someone like flexes and their neck comes forward, or if you you see the movie The Warrior, I think that's what it's called, and the one brother, the two brothers are MMA fighters in it. That one brother with the huge neck muscles that just stick out in his back, well, that's the trapezius, and the trapezius is a huge muscle. So when we're drawing the trapezius muscle, it's important to know the insertion points of the muscle because that's going to help you draw the figure so much better. It'll help you understand the neck region so much better as well. So it inserts here in the bottom part of the skull. There also is two other muscles up here like head muscles, but the muscle that we're drawing right now that we're concerned with will begin to connect itself up here. And on the other side, it'll be here. This is like the insertion points of the muscle. It kind of has a shape of a kite, and we'll get into the diagram of the figure too where we draw it like a kite, but for now let's just do the basic shape. So it's going to come down. It's also connect to this border of the scapula above where you have the same region pretty much where you have the shoulder or the deltoid connecting to, and it kind of connects right along that same edge there, but it also wraps around the front. It connects to the collarbone. We'll have to go through all the different views to see how that works. This muscle can get very big, and when it's flexed, it kind of has a shape like this. And it kind of all pops out back here as well. We'll get into that later. For now, I'm going to give him a little bit of a neck muscle here. Not too big, but I want to give him somewhat of a neck muscle there, where it's not like all skinny and flat. Then it kind of rolls over the scapula right here, the top part of the tip of the scapula. And it rolls over all this muscle here, over the lats, and it comes down like so. So it connects down to like the 12th thoracic vertebrae or to the 7th cervical vertebra. But an easy way to memorize this is just know that it comes down to about the elbow regions, where the elbows are. If their arms are just kind of pulled back a little bit, right about there is where the end point of that muscle is. Right, and then it has a shape coming straight down because it connects to the vertebrae here. Right, so that's the general shape of it. And again, you want to memorize the insertion point. So it connects across the scapula, so right along the edge of the deltoid muscle, connects back around to the front a little bit, part way of the clavicle. We'll get into that when we do a front view and side views. And then connects up here to the base of the skull. If you know the insertion points of muscles, when you're drawing them from different angles, you're going to see why that knowledge is so important. The other thing important about this muscle too is its shape that derives from how the tendon is. So the tendon kind of goes like that. There's a part right, if you imagine a straight line going across here, where the tops of the clavicle would touch, imagine a straight line going between them. That's about where this muscle comes down and starts making this little diamond right here. Then it comes down like this. So this is the shape of the tendon of the muscle. Like so. So that shape is important to memorize because it'll help you when you're drawing the figure and shading in the muscles, and then knowing the way in which the lines of the muscle go, that is the texture or the fibers go, is important. And you could probably actually draw just a little bit of muscle like this because it just depends how you want to look at the tendon and muscle. You can still develop part of that. So I'm still going to draw the shape here a little bit in the tendon area as well with the white or something close to white. So they kind of start kind of diagonal like this, the fibers, and then they kind of start going horizontally like this across the muscle plane like that, and then they kind of come from here, they kind of start going diagonally down like so. Right, so that's the main map of the fibers. Mainly I just wanted to show because you will see a little bit of these fibers on super lean people that don't have much fat, like very little fat at all. Let's go ahead and emphasize the overall shape of this muscle. That's the part you're memorizing where it connects to, and knowing where it connects to is what helps you memorize the shape as well. So now we're going to do the thickness of the fibers. They start here where they're connecting to the tendons, and they're following those flow lines that we drew. Now they start branching out more horizontally, like this, because they're connected, because of where they're connecting, coming out. Then they start coming down this way, like so. But there's a shadow region, and this region you definitely want to memorize. It's similar to these shadow regions down here. Whenever you're drawing the figure and you're lighting it from different directions, you'll remember this because you've memorized this. And then when you draw with skin over it, you'll know, oh, okay, that's why when someone flexes their back, they get the shadow there, depending which way the light's coming from. And then you'll have, some of your tendon here connecting off of the shoulder, off of the scapula rather, like that. And then you'll get the kind of darkness here as well, the darker fibers, the shadow area part right there. Right, I'm just going to add a few more white highlights here, or something close to white. It's not quite white, but it's close to it. So that's the basic shape. And also, we're going to be going through more of a basic diagram that will help you memorize the back muscles, or help solidify the back muscles more. But knowing the connection points is really important. So you don't want to skim this part. You want to definitely memorize all this. All right, so let's go ahead this time. Let's try to just draw the shape of the inner kite. It's kind of a kite shape if you think of the whole thing. You have a cross and it's kind of like this. That's the basic shape. And that's the basic diagram you first memorize. And if you've already gone through one of my little bonus videos for VIP members, which is free to become a VIP member, then you know how that works already. So remember, it comes down, then it's going to come across and connect here. So that's where you have and actually I didn't make it that big on the other guy, on the other side, so I won't make it that big over here. Connects here, comes across the scapula a little bit, comes down here. Right, so that's the basic shape of this muscle. All right. Again, the tendons, remember they kind of start like a star, where they kind of come out like this and they kind of curve upward like that. They kind of come across horizontally and then they kind of curve down like that. If you kind of memorize it that way, I think it makes it a little bit easier. Think about the initialness of the flow, which is over here at the shoulder. Just add a few of those lines in there like that. Right. The important part here is this inner shadow part, because this is where you get most of your detail when you add the skin, and where to draw the shadow points, where to draw that detail out. Knowing this is important, because when we add the skin on, you'll be like, oh, okay, I already got this memorized. I just gotta, instead of making little darker lines, muscle fibers, I just turn it into a shadow. And it's gonna save you a lot of time when you're drawing the skin of the muscles. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of the tendon here. And then finally we'll add some dark fibers right along the side here. Add a few dark fibers coming across all the way. Like so, just kind of break it up a little bit. Kind of define the outer shape here. Like that. So you can see some of these muscles, and I need to add this line, this darker line right here for that. You see that some of these muscles here show through, and so that's important. Kind of darken that a little bit down over there. Right, so that's the trapezius muscle from the back side. I want you to draw this several times from reference. This is a really important muscle to memorize, and also where the fibers go when you want to draw nice, realistic looking backs. draw it a few times from memory, really get a good feel of that muscle, memorize the connection points. You want to do with all the muscles is memorize their connecting points, because you're going to memorize the basic skeleton, not the whole skeleton. I mean, sure, you probably have a lot of that already memorized, enough to where when we make the skeleton some basic shape, and we're like, okay, like when we turn the skeleton into a basic shape, we'll be like, yeah, well, I can do that because, I have memorized all the skeletal structure pretty much already, and now I'm just simplifying it. And that's all you have to keep really in your memory when you simplify it. And then, of course, those important parts like the elbow and stuff like that. But anyway, so it's important to memorize the connecting points that they connect to the bottom of the skull, they wrap it around part of the collar, come around here to where the same place where the shoulder is, right on the edge of the deltoid, or on that part of the scapula, that blade of the scapula, rolls over part of the scapula, comes down and connects to about a little bit about the elbow length, or a little bit above the elbows. Either way is fine. So now let's go ahead and draw that same muscle structure, but we'll draw it from the 3/4 back view. And this is a muscle we're going to draw all the way around to the front view. Now watch how easy this is to do once if you've done your work so far, you've actually went ahead and drew that several times until you have that back, you have the insertion points memorized of the trapezius muscle, and you have the basic shape memorized. If you've done that, you've done your homework, then you know how to connect all this. It's really simple. Okay, I have the center point here, the center line. I know I have my first connection point up here at the base of the skull. I know my other connection point is all right here along the scapula there, or along the same place the shoulder's connecting. Then it kind of rolls over the scapula, comes down, comes over the lat muscle, comes down to about where the elbows are at. Right, so about equal with that, and then it works its way up here. Kind of has, from this view, you kind of get a better shape, and also from the side view, there's kind of a sort of a shape like that, two little humps there. And those humps are important to memorize from this view because you'll be drawing a lot of characters from views like that where you'll be able to see that hump. And I want to make sure I be consistent with this. I don't want to get too high there, so I want to come like this and then start coming up. Right, so that's the basic shape there. And you're able to do that from this view. Even though you never drew this from this view before, you should have been able to figure that all out by yourself. Before I even drew anything, you should have been able to figure that out. Because you know the insertion points of the muscle now, because you did your homework and you memorized it. You drew it several times from reference and memory, and so now you have that memorized. Remember, the kind of comes up like this, then kind of comes across horizontal, then it starts turning downward down here. We also know that a lot of this inside part here is tendons. And so this whole outer back part is a tendon that has that kind of shape to it. Again, we'll get into, when we add skin and stuff, we'll get into the dynamicness of muscles from different angles, and that's going to help you when you're drawing your figures from your mind. I'm going to draw a few dark lines here, just to kind of get the feel of the figure, the muscle. We'll add the tendon here. Maybe a few tendon lines coming off here, like so. This is all the darker shadow area. Add a few white highlights to some of these fibers. Keeping it pretty simple. Alright, now when you have this other muscle, then we know, okay, this is kind of turning away from us a little bit, but we know we have this, top part here. We know it's going to come down the same way before. We know it's going to connect over there. So run along that spine of the scapula. It's going to kind of come over the edge of the scapula and come down and connect to the same area like this. Right? Right, once you have the basic shape, you know your lines kind of go like this. We know they kind of come down here. They kind of come up there. You have the darker part of the muscle here. Kind of comes sideways, more horizontal here. I'm going to draw in the actual shape of the muscle like that. This is the darker part. Right, so that's how the traps will look from that 3/4 view. And it kind of, notice that kind of lump in the muscle there. That is because of the muscles underneath it, right, and the shape. So it's kind of coming over the lat here, which kind of pushes the muscle up a little bit. So you get this slight curve from the lat muscle. Then it kind of dips down because there's really nothing there in the spine. And then you kind of get the other under muscles, which kind of pull it out a little bit more right around here because of the spine and some of the under muscles there. I forget what those ones are called. We went through them earlier. Okay. Right, so from the side view then, we're going to see how far along the collarbone it actually goes. Okay, so it comes to a little bit, almost to the part where the deltoid is ending and the pecs are beginning. So it comes down quite far to the around on the collarbone, right about here, right about to the edge of that deltoid. And it kind of has a shape, kind of comes up like this, and it kind of goes like that to the skull. Remember, we know the attachment point, so we know it attaches along the where the shoulder and where the scapula is, so along that shoulder right there, comes around. We know it kind of goes over the part of the scapula and then goes back into the back. Okay, we know it follows the spine. It's a thinner muscle. And then it has some buffness here. Depends how big the person. They can get it really big here. Just depends, but this person's not that big, so we're just going to keep it consistent and come down like so. That's how it looks from the side view. That's pretty much all the muscle you see from the side view. Like that. We'll draw a little bit of the tendon insertion point here coming out like that. Then we'll draw the fibers. The side view, they kind of flow in this direction here. Then they start kind of coming like they're going to be going horizontal. Wrap around the side and they kind of come down like that. Okay, add a few highlight marks here, like so. Right, that's how the muscles look from the, from the side view. It's gonna look like that. So it really wasn't memorized much more. We do see the shape change a little bit in the muscle, but not very much. So when we draw in this 3/4 view, we know that all this here is going to disappear. We're not going to see all that back part of it, but we will see this part where it connects here to about the shoulder. Remember where the deltoid ends up, and it kind of goes like this, and it kind of comes back and goes to the back of the skull back there. You'll see a thin part of it coming around this way, and we know it connects, remember, all around to the edge of that scapula and rolls around to the back blade of the scapula, so we know we're going to see about that much of the muscle. So you know the connecting points are all along here, which I'll draw in this color here. Right, that's the tendon kind of connecting area. And since you know that, and you know the other connecting point is up there, then you can kind of figure out from the connecting points, kind of connecting the dots and go, okay, this is how it's going to look. We know this kind of shape here, which is here. And once you have all that figured out, then you can draw in the muscle from that angle. Right, like so. On the other side, we're not going to be able to see any of it from this 3/4 view. This is going to be blocked by, you have your muscles coming, let me go and draw this in red. You'll have some muscles coming down here. Then you'll have some of your neck muscles in this area here, Adam's apple and so forth if it's a man. Then you have that muscle comes around and connects over here. So we're not going to see any of the traps from that view. But from the front view, we will be able to see, well, we will be able to see some of the trap muscles. Depending on how big the person is, they can either, let's go back to red here. They can either be shaped like way out like this, that's like really huge or flexing and everything, or, the more average persons can kind of come down And goes like that. So we're going to kind of keep true to how we've been drawing them. And this is the muscle that gives most of that shape to the neck portion. So it connects in the back, and this is important to understand this back view of this muscle and then how the muscles will overlap in the front. So we know it's all going back there. Right, so that's all the back part of it. That's in the background. Then we'll draw the foreground. We know the foreground attaches to where the shoulder's at, right? Remember, where the deltoid ends here, that's where you have the front of this muscle. And it connects to the top part of the clavicle. And it comes up here and goes back like that. And so I'm going to try to show this by how it's shaded here. And this is important to memorize, and we're going to have another muscle that's going to come across and overlap that. But still, this information is to help you understand why you have the little ditches in the neck, and to help you draw, oh man, it's to help you draw neck so much easier when you have this information memorized. This is so important. Don't skim this part. Memorize this. It's so important to drawing nice, good necks on both males and females. And we'll get more into the detail of male and female and the differences too. Right, so that's how the muscle's going to look. When we get into this other neck muscle, you're going to see why it was so important that we learn this. And you're going to be like, that's why the neck looks the way it looks. When you understand the mechanics of why the neck looks the way it looks, you'll no longer be guessing at it or looking at photos and trying to go, okay, why does it look like this from this angle? You'll understand the mechanics of it, and you'll know exactly why. Remember, it connects here, comes back over there. We'll have this darker part here shaded in. That's the background part. It's going to be partly overlapped anyway. And you have the tendons connecting this part here, like so. Right, so that's the trapezius. Go ahead and memorize that. Super important. You memorize that shape right there, because when we draw the other muscles going over it, it's going to make so much more sense about how the neck looks and why it looks the way it looks.